So I like Smash Brothers, and it's not completely off topic for this channel. At this point, the series has 5.5 games, and sometimes I look back fondly at the unlocks and announcements that brought me the most excitement and just made me flat out happy. And then I look at the bigger picture and ask myself whose inclusion probably was the most important, so this week, I figured why not discuss both. I'll be going over who my favorite for each entry is and which character I think had the most impact. I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is my own silly little nostalgia trip back through Super Smash Bros. For the original game on the Nintendo 64, I played Ness. I tend to play characters whose game I'm into and I feel like I have a deep personal connection with, so it's pretty weird that I choose him since I still haven't gotten through Earthbound. Yet I feel a special bond with the little tiddlywink, just through the process of unlocking him. The internet wasn't as prevalent back then, so when my friends and I could piece together that there were 4 secret characters, we didn't know who all of them were. I remember a lot of sleepovers where we'd play this game late, and when one of us stumbled upon how to unlock him, everybody else with the copy did the same, and I felt compelled to use him. Sure, he had a weird playstyle, I'd never heard of him, and couldn't really understand most of what he was saying, but after that spot on the roster being vacant for so long, it felt earned to use him. He was my main in the original, one of the 3 I used most often in Melee, and to this day is still a character I'll occasionally play around with, due to the special fondness I still feel for him from the 64 era. One day I'll beat Earthbound, I swear. For most important fighter, and this goes for the whole series, it's Mario. Jumpman, Mr. Nintendo, Mr. Video Games. I shouldn't have to explain why, and whether you love, hate, or just find him boring, video games wouldn't exist as they do without him. Home consoles were popular for a bit, but then someone killed them. And they remained a bit of a pariah until the NES with Super Mario Bros. And a port of Donkey Kong brought them back. Without Mario, maybe we'd still be going to the arcades. Maybe Hollywood would still be dominating. Maybe we'd be reading books, which is still a good idea, or maybe someone else would have just done the job sometime down the line, but we'd still probably be down a few console generations if they did. Mario also set the standard for platformers, which not only spawned some of my favorite franchises, but also paved the way for eventually Smash as well, with its platformer fighting mechanics. We owe Mario a terrific debt, and while the original has a lot of good and prominent picks, I don't think any of them were quite as obvious as Mario. In Melee, my favorite's Peach. What can I say? Sometimes I want to play as big, manly men, sometimes I want to play as cute girls. Peach is pretty, she's pink, she gets sassy with her taunts, she gets kidnapped a lot, but at least she kicks butt in Smash and tends to be the most competent character in the RPGs. And sweet Christmas, is it fun to body check people with her rear for the Peach Bomber. But bringing it back, I think playing as Peach here really helped me to accept some things about myself. While I don't think they meant any serious harm by it, there were a lot of times I remember uncles calling us lads Nancy when we were kids, kind of instilling a sense that being feminine was bad. While I like shows with a focus on violence like Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles, I also tended to pick the cutest starter, like Chikorita, and enjoyed it when the fiction I read had some romance interjected. Back then, I'd pretend I was playing Peach ironically, like, oh haha, you're getting beat up by a girl, but secretly, I was pretty into it. It made me more comfortable doing things that weren't traditionally masculine, or even just choosing the female avatar option if they were either cuter or the guy equivalent just looked too doofy. While a small thing, Princess Peach made me more comfortable with myself, and these days, I don't let myself be confined by what I think other people expect of me. Wait, this is a Smash Brothers video, right? Melee was a little hard to choose a most impactful inclusion for. After all the main characters from most Nintendo franchises and some odd choices were already in the original title, and Melee largely just fleshed out its cast by turning to each series' supporting roster. But I thought about it from another angle and came up with Fire Emblem. For Melee, I could mention how he's top 3 in many tier lists, or how many other characters from those games show up after he opened the door, but honestly, he's here for his impact on Fire Emblem in general. Before this, Fire Emblem was a Japanese-only game and no one in the West knew who Marth was, though the name Mars might have sounded familiar to a few. Then Melee came out and everybody wondered who this blue-haired boy who spoke in tongues was, as well as his fire-flavored sidekick. So Nintendo localized the next game, Blazing Blade, which had exactly neither of these characters in it, and it was A niche title. I played it, my brother played it, eventually my other brother was born and he'd someday play it. And while I think it did alright, it wasn't exactly a smash hit. The whole series almost died once actually, but with the push they got from Awakening, it got a lot more popular, and now with 3 houses, I'd say it's pretty close to being mainstream. Engage just came out this past Friday, and despite a lot of negativity around it, I can't imagine it'll be a flop. And absolutely none of this would have happened if Marth had not shown up in international versions of Super Smash Bros. Melee. From what I hear, Sakurai wanted to include him in the first game, but it was considered too obscure outside of Japan, and they even considered cutting him from the global version, but kept him in for the heck of it. It was a bit of a close one, and as a fan of the series, I'm glad they did. And even if I wasn't, it would have bugged me to no end if I'd found out later that there were extra characters not included in my copy of the game. I paid full MSRP, or at least my parents did. I deserved a full roster, didn't I? I'm sure a lot of you have formative memories connected to games. A lot of mine have to do with a certain blue gentleman, but I'm also a huge fan of Kirby. I remember watching my cousin play Kirby's Adventure and longed to play one of the games myself. When my brother and I finally got a Super Nintendo, we put it on our Christmas list, and wouldn't you know it, we got Kirby's Dream Course. Not a terrible game, though not what we were hoping for. It made it all the sweeter when we finally got a Kirby platformer with Superstar. A collection of short games with some wonderful co-op. I'd never played anything like it before. Sure, there was 2-player in Donkey Kong Country, and I do love those, but in that you take turns, whereas here it was simultaneous. Despite it having a more powerful DS port, this remains my favorite entry, due part to nostalgia, part to the easier couch co-op setup. And while all the titles on the cartridge were fun, none quite grabbed my attention like The Revenge of Meta Knight. You thought I was gonna go for DDD with the music, didn't you? You've been bamboozled. The game is great with its more machine-like bosses, an actual slight focus on story, a branch depending on how your first go-around with Heavy Lobster goes, and you actually busting up the halberd piece by piece, with an overview of the ship so that you can see your destructive progress rather than just being told or having to figure out what you did from context clues. So satisfying. And then there's the game's primary antagonist, Meta Knight. I love his design, being edgy with his mask, cape, and atypical sword, yet still cute with his small and round demeanor. He'd be intimidating if he didn't look so huggable. Heck, even the premise of the game is pretty ridiculous. Him threatening Dreamland with a fearsome battleship, and, if you read a plot synopsis, all because he thought the residents were becoming too lazy. That's super silly. Seeing him in the Halberd, a flying ship designed by HAL Laboratories, get featured in Smash, pretty heavily in Subspace Emissary 2, hit me right in my childhood and was one of the most exciting things to be announced for the series for me. For weeks, I'd start my day by listening to the Revenge of Meta Knight remix they had up on Smash Dojo. When I got to try the game out early at a convention that had a Japanese copy, I chose Meta Knight and won my first round of Brawl that I ever played, only further solidifying my love of the character. He will always be a special little guy that we all take very seriously. Right? As for the most important addition, it's Sonic. Of course it's Sonic. Sonic T. Hedgehog. When they announced Snake for the game, we all kind of raised our eyebrows and knew there was a possibility of more third parties getting added, but when none showed up for a while and we heard that Hideo Kojima had fervently requested Snake's inclusion, there was a sense that he might have been a very special and very singular exception. When the trailer for Sonic dropped on Smash Dojo, it broke the internet and I nearly lost my mind. Way back when, Nintendo and Sega had been bitter rivals in the console wars, the latter even poking fun at the former with taglines like, "Sega does what Nintendo don't." While the two had certainly been on better terms since the fall of the Dreamcast, it was pretty crazy to see Mario and Sonic in the same game, though maybe them beating the crap out of each other in it was appropriate. Sonic's inclusion here means a lot. In one sense, it's symbolic of the two companies burying the hatchet, even if most of the ill will was probably just in the imagination of fans. And he's also one of the most iconic characters in video games, especially when it comes to retro and platforming series. Getting him in Smash was a huge win and probably did a lot to put the series on the path of it being a celebration of not just Nintendo, but video games as a whole. And it also delayed the game. Seriously, if you read the history of Sonic, it turns out Nintendo approached Sega early about putting him in, they refused, then changed their mind at the last minute, so the release date was pushed back so they could include him. That would be too big of an opportunity to pass up, and it would also explain why the guy only shows up for the final scene of Subspace Emissary. And as much as I love seeing him here, I requested all for this game. I spent the whole day at home, sitting around, fantasizing about having it in my hands. Sonic, do you have a quota for ruining my day? You waste my PTO. You start us Nintendo fans off with those amazing GameCube ports, then move on to unplayable motion control nonsense on the Wii, and you start unraveling some of the more convoluted comic book threads only to cancel them. That last one might be more Ken Pender's fault, but still. Tell you what, you give me Mania 2 or a collection of the advanced games and we can be friends again. For Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, or Smash 4 for short, it's Rosalina and Luma for me. I love Super Mario Galaxy, plus the way you can disconnect the two to pull off some crazy long-range smash attacks makes them... Okay, no one's buying it. We can end the ruse, though I really do love Galaxy. It's Mega Man, of course. Him getting announced for Smash might have just been the single greatest day of my life. Seriously, I have a Mega Man channel, do I need to explain this? Platformers are the staple of retro gaming and, by extension, the backbone of the industry. You would not have Fortnite without Mario's hops, Sonic's spins, and Rock's lemons. Am I overblowing things? Maybe, but I still contend that platformers are the most important genre and Mega Man has the most solid in the business. From the games to the cartoons to the comics, back to the games again, no media franchise has had as big of an impact on me as Mega Man, and I am the person I am today largely because of him. Nothing in life has given me as much joy and pain, but mostly joy as Mega Man. I welcome AI because Mega Man makes me think that maybe the robots won't kill us all, but fight for everlasting peace. He's also the one that taught me that video game music can be good and not just background noise. And beyond irrevocably impacting and shaping my life, he's also implemented really well in the games. You think Mega Man, you think, that guy's gonna shoot me. And he will, but he's also going to spin into you, throw stuff at you, slash you, light you on fire, blow smoke up your butt, and send swirling leaves your way, and that's only scratching the surface. He has so many moves beyond just his basic pew-pew and the typical fighting game punch-ups, and each feels like it was chosen with care. It gets even crazier with custom moves. You choose Lucina, and I love her dearly, but you can only get counter, easy counter, precise counter. You get Mega Man, you get Crash Bomber, Ice Slasher, Danger Wrap. That last one feels like a bit of a deep cut. My point is, Rock's history feels really celebrated here, and I imagine that the uninitiated would question whether the little guy can really do all this or if they're just making it up. It's been over 30 years, he's learned some stuff. He was also probably the most hype announcement in this one, besides maybe one DLC character, and a lot of gamers my age were losing their mind with his inclusion. There's a part of me that thinks he really should have been included in Brawl, and from what I hear, Capcom would've let it happen. They were just kinda waiting for Nintendo to ask, so I was kinda disappointed that he didn't show up. But hey, not inviting him until Smash 4 meant that he didn't have to compete with Sonic for the spotlight, and this was able to be his moment, which was really special. Still wish I could have seen him in Subspace Emissary though. And for most important, it's Mega Man again! Oh wow, congratulations buddy, do you want both trophies, just the one, or should I melt them both down and just make you one big one? But seriously, this is a platformer brawler, and what platforming mascot is more iconic than Mega Man? Answer, Mario and Sonic, who we already discussed. With him and Pac-Man thrown in, it feels like the series finally has all the original icons of gaming. And I already talked about how it's practically a sin that it took them this long. Need I say anything more about this man, this hero, this absolute legend? Putting him in was the greatest thing that ever happened to Smash, and if he's not in every release going forward, I'm not sure I want to play anymore, even if this is one of my favorite series. What's that? I can't choose Mega Man twice? It's my list though. Okay, fine. Gunner because you can dress him up as X, Cloud because he broke the internet and the game, and Bayonetta because she broke the game harder. Take your pick. Ultimate is a bit of a toss-up. There's two characters that I think are great inclusions for kind of a similar reason, so who to pick is kinda tricky. Good thing I'm doing two categories. This might get me a lot of hate, especially in some countries, but I do actually use Min Min as a secondary. What can I say? I love stretchy punches, which also led me to really loving her original game, ARMS. I've also wanted to take up boxing, I've just never found the time, so I'd occasionally play Punch-Out! Then, when they announced ARMS, I was instantly in love. Boxing, with stretchy punches! When I pre-ordered my Switch, I also put in for a few games that came out at launch, so I'd have something to play, but this was the title that I really wanted. It's a lot of fun, especially with motion controls, and when I get other people to tag in, they tend to have a good time. I think I might have actually sold at least one copy. You're welcome, Nintendo. The game has two problems, though. The first is how bare bones it is. You have a basic arcade mode, a versus, and a few minigames, but nothing too wild. While I think it's a good deal for $40 and an absolute steal for $30, $60 feels a bit high for what you get. The other issue is lack of marketing. I remember it being announced along with the Switch, but I don't recall seeing too much of a push for it after it actually dropped. Maybe it had something to do with the lukewarm response, though I wish it had gotten a bit more attention. When they announced an ARMS character for Smash, I thought it was finally the game's chance, but it seems like a price drop was the only thing that could have saved it. Well, that and making the rep a bit more likable in Smash. Yes, she has amazing range on attacks not considered projectiles. Yes, you can play as her without a lot of thought. Yes, I really wanted Twintel to be the fighter, but I still love that they put in an ARMS rep and will play as her when not playing as Megs. And are we really considering over 2 million units a failure? I think Switch sales have really skewed our expectations. Smash 4 came out on the Wii U, and so did the super popular Splatoon. Sometimes I swear that game somehow sold more copies than there were Wii U's. Its success makes no sense. It felt like such a waste that Inkling wasn't a character in Smash 4, and yeah, I know it came out after that entry, but Fire Emblem Fates released a month after Splatoon, and they still rushed Corrin in. We could go back and forth on the possible reasons, but end of the day, Splatoon was the new property, and I think that's what should have been pushed. Inkling probably would have been received better as a fighter as well, but hindsight, right? When we got that first trailer for Smash Ultimate and people were arguing over whether it was a new game or an advanced port, I was jubilant since it felt like the mistake had finally been corrected. All three Splatoon titles have done amazingly well, and Nintendo seems to think of it as one of their flagship titles, so making Inkling the first fighter shown off felt really appropriate. I'm a fan myself. I don't really play shooters, but Splatoon's whimsical nature has made it the only one to drag me in. I wouldn't call myself amazing at it, but I usually have fun whenever I boot up one of the games. And I wasn't just glad to see Inkling and Smash to fill a quota, they might have been the character I used most when the game launched, and they still remain one of my top picks. Their design, their different character skins, and their mannerisms all give them a lot of personality, and they're another fighter that has an impressive variety of weapons, making them a lot of fun to use. And no, I don't just spam roller, though I will use it when appropriate. So those are all my picks, but hey, what are yours? If you pick anyone other than Mario for most important in N64 though, you're gonna have to come up with one heck of an argument. For me, a fighting game's roster kind of makes or breaks the experience, and Smash has never disappointed. With Ultimate, I don't think the game has ever been better, and I'm actually kind of worried about the series going forward, since I'll miss any omission, even if it's a character I'm not all that keen on. Maybe they can just do some expanded ports. But as always, thanks for watching, maybe consider subscribing if you enjoy Mega Man content, and maybe even let me know if I can get away with Smash content now and again. While it'd be a little late, I could totally do a video listing who I'd want to see added to Smash that wouldn't have 6 out of the 10 spots just be Mega Man characters. At least as long as I set some rules for myself.